My name is Sam. I'm a solutions consultant here at Computronix. I'm excited because I get the pleasure to present to you today about our integration with Archistar, with our PLS and POSSE platform products. This is something we've been having in the works for a little while, and we're just super excited to be able to share with that to you today. I assume that if you clicked through to this presentation that you're one of the many jurisdictions who are really concerned about approval times. It's a big deal across a lot of the permitting and inspections groups and building groups that we interact with that use POSSE on a daily basis. Just across North America, approval times and lots of the need for new residential housing is putting a lot of pressure onto these groups. And I'm sure if you're one of those, then this is something you're going to be very interested in, and what are the ways that we can improve those times and really make that process better, not just with POSSE, but also with Archistar as well, and an integration between those two platforms. So if we have we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. So go ahead and use the chat feature as we go here, and we will pick up those questions as we go. I'll try to answer those, and I've also got Josh Collier here helping with those. So he will help us bring those questions to light, answer those in the chat, and we'll answer some of them here on the call as well, just so those are recorded. All right, and with that being said, I would like to quickly and also introduce Dr. Ben Khoury on the call, who's here with us. Ben, how are you doing today?
Very good, very good. I'm dialing in from San Diego at a conference. So yeah, super excited to be here.
Fantastic. So glad to have you here, Ben. So just so everyone to be aware, Dr. Ben Khoury, he's got a PhD in generative design, and he's the founder, CEO, and really the mastermind behind this Archistar platform that we're going to be taking a look at today. That's really this breakthrough generative design platform for land developers in a lot of different ways, but then also for cities and jurisdictions to use as well for that pre-assessment process. So just to get started here, Dr. Khoury, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself, a little bit of your background and about your experience and how Archistar got started.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. And as I said before, I really appreciate you having me on here, and it's great to have all you to talk to. We're an Australian-based company, so we're based in Sydney, but we have been doing a lot of work across North America. So I feel like I travel up to Canada and the US, monthly. So I'm here, half the time, and I'm in San Diego at the moment. What I started off as an architect, that was my background, but I did a PhD in generative design. And what was super interesting for me was how could you use tech to help streamline processes in design? And as we started to do that and we allowed the computer to generate designs, we found our customers were the property industry that were really looking at, we want better transparency. We want to understand what we can do with our properties, what we can do with our land, and what we can develop, according to the zoning bylaws. So we spent a lot of time in that process digitizing zoning bylaws. And as most of you are aware, a lot of that's in like PDFs. It's not digitized well. It doesn't really work well with computers. So we had to spend, and you're probably well aware that every city is unique, so there's no standardization across cities. So there's a very big challenge to start to digitize zoning in a consistent format that a computer can use that and read that to generate building designs. And we did that across Australia quite well. It took us a long time to do it, but we really figured out how to do that. And then as we started doing that, and the industry was using that technology to understand what they could do, it was prospective, what if scenarios. The government in Australia started noticing what we're doing there and said, hey, we've got an issue on the permitting side that people are submitting applications. We want to use that same technology you're using to generate designs to check designs coming in to the city. And the whole premise around it, and it's evolved over time, is that what we're hearing all around the world is that the quality of the submission coming in is not great. And there's always going to be non-compliances. And this is part of the issue. And there's big pressure on cities to get more permits out the door faster. But what we're hearing from everyone is if that submission comes in and it's incomplete or it's not correct or it's not compliant, there's not much we can do except send it back and, say, fix these areas up, these are your non-compliance issues. And that back and forth is where the frustration lies half the time. It's not in the city's hands, it's back with the applicant. The applicant gets frustrated. So what we're really trying to do here is, and we'll dive into it a bit more, is can we solve some of that by doing a very simple thing? It's checking the design before it gets to the city. And if we can run through a digital check before it gets in a pre-check, the applicant can see where they're non-compliant before they submit. They can make those corrections. By the time it gets to the city, it's a more high quality submission, more complete, and you get a standardized report that comes in with it. And we've been piloting this around, and we're now in production with a few cities around North America with this technology, and it's turning out to really look like a winner in this space, to really help cities manage that pipeline of permits coming through, and also manage the experience with the customer, and the applicant coming in. Can we make that a really nice experience coming through? So that's a bit of background about where we started, where we got to, and yeah, I'll pass it back over to you, Sam.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm just gonna share my screen real quick here as well, just to move us forward in this conversation. I do appreciate, yeah, all that background, Dr. Curry. That's awesome, and I think, yeah, like you said, everybody who kind of comes across this that we've seen so far, that's running into these sort of time and approval issues is immediately like, yes, that's that's what we're looking for, right? So just to dig a little bit deeper into this idea of the Archistar product, and you mentioned specifically it kind of started with helping out developers themselves, but then there was a kind of a transition to also this e-check, this pre-check process for governments. So for the e-check product itself, what's the main target audience? Who's the kind of person who would be using this, the e-check system?
Yeah. So it's interesting. The main clients we work with is actually the cities, because what we're finding is that because that quality of submission coming in is not great and it's taking a lot of time on the city side, what we're able to offer the city is a product and a white labeled service that they can then offer to the applicants to say, hey, look, before you submit, just run it through this pre-check first. We're going to provide that service to you. You're going to get a better quality submission, and you're going to get a more streamlined process through if you follow this path. So it's interesting, like the cities, we're working with the cities because the main reason we do that instead of going to the applicants direct is that it's much more powerful as a service coming from the city. If we went directly to the applicants and said, hey, use this and then submit it to the city without working with the city, it kind of defeats the purpose. So we're really building close relationships with the cities, and they're providing it out as a service. And that is making it so much more better and streamlined because it does come from the city.
Yeah, that makes tons of sense. So you're really working with the city to figure out, hey, what are your rules? What are the things that you're looking for in your submissions? What's a high quality submission to you for your review group? And then help on the submission side, get those submissions up to a higher quality level.
Exactly. And like the city staff, you've seen it all. So you know what's good, what's bad. And we'd much prefer to be aligned with your side to know what you want to see coming in, because then that's what we can push out to the applicants. And then the applicants are very happy because like, okay, I know I've got to hit this, to make a high quality application. This is what the city is looking for. So it ticks a lot of boxes doing it this way.
Absolutely. That's great to hear. So just digging a little deeper as well. So how does Archistar eCheck really, like, what are the things that it does that helps jurisdictions with approvals? How does that eCheck process actually work? And how can we trust that eCheck is actually a good check?
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's something that, most cities ask, like, how do we know that the computer's checking it right? And, we have built technology that reads off the PDF drawings that come in. You can see here on the screen a 3D like BIM model. We started there. But we found the industry wasn't submitting much on 3D BIM. So what we did is we said, well, what does the industry submit in? What do cities accept? And the majority of cities, what we can do, they'll accept a PDF coming in. There are still cities that are taking paper-based in, but for PDF submissions, we're kind of hitting the bulk of the market of what submissions are coming in. What our software does is it extracts out the drawings from that PDF, and then it compares it against a digital version of the zoning bylaws. And we're actually also trialing out the building codes as well. Now, how that works and how we get that quality up is that we actually run a pilot and then an onboarding process with the city where we digitize the rules and then we run it internally on submissions coming in with the city staff. So the city staff are involved, they're seeing the results of it, and they've got the ability to help train it and fine tune it and let us know where it's getting it right, where it's getting it wrong. And we go through that process for about 3 to 6 months so that there's enough volume going through it, because not every submission hits every zoning bylaw. So you need to get through volume to start picking up where there are edge cases and there are unique things that come through. So it's a very collaborative process with the city. And then as we get that through, we fine tune it. If there is anything in there that's subjective or it's not as black and white, we can label them as requiring manual review, and they can still be assessed by the city as a manual approach. But wherever it is, an automated check can do it, and the city's comfortable that seeing those automated checks are working time and time again, they can be run as an automatic check. And you end up with an interactive version of the drawings, click through ticks and crosses. And I can show that in a minute, like how that looks. And you also end up with a PDF report too. So as part of the application, you get access to the assessment, and that can come in as simple as a high quality, medium quality, low quality. So instantly when you're getting that in, the first thing you look at is, what has the computer checked? How good is this a solution? How am I going to do this application? Is this going to be streamlined as a really high quality application, or is this a poor quality application? Either we're going to send it straight back with the feedback, or it's going to go to another team that's going to look at variances and other things.
Absolutely. So much good information there. I do love to, you were kind of talking about that partnership, working with the staff to get the model up and running. I think that's something we're seeing across the AI space, is that human in the loop is still very much part of any of these AI tools that we're going to implement, we're going to use. You still need to have a human involved at some point, even if we're going to try to trust the computer or trust the model to do something important for us. We still need to integrate these in ways where we have people involved that are checking those things and are really refining that process so that it gets to that really high quality level where that intelligence is actually useful and is saving people time.
Absolutely.
And so if you're prepared to share, I would love to have you go ahead and just kind of show us what you find, just the highlights of the Archistar platform. And then I've got it up here to show what it's going to look like to actually do that connection between POSSE PLS and the Archistar platform. But let's go ahead and just get introduced to the software a little bit, if you're happy to go ahead and share for us.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. So what you're seeing here is that the software is all web-based. So everything's on the web, and you start off with a map of your city. This all gets white labeled into your city view, so it appears that it's coming from the city. And when you click on a property, basically you'll get some basic information about that property. What zone is it in? What lot size, the frontage, what planning bylaws are related to it. You'll also be able to bring in layers like zoning, buildings. Like there are a few things that you can bring in to help with this as well. And that can come from your GIS layers, and that's custom per city, what you need to bring in. We mainly look for GIS layers that will trigger different bylaws in the assessment. So once that comes in and an applicant wants to do it, they type in the address they want, then they click on e-check reports. And this will basically come in with a new compliance report. This is where you can make it modular and you can roll it out in stages. So you could start maybe with laneway houses, or single detached houses or duplexes or multiplexes. You can pick stage by stage, zone by zone, what you want to release out, so that you've got control of that. You can have stuff that's released to the public, then you can have stuff that's internal behind the scenes. So there's a lot of control about what you push out to the public. But if you want to do a laneway house on this one, for example, and you click on that, what it will do is it may ask you some questions if there's some questions you need to ask, and then it's going to ask you to upload your design. So this is where it checks the design. So there are two formats that you can check. You can check directly off a CAD file. That's an e-check file here. You're going to get an instant result. But for a lot of people, they just want to submit up what the PDF they're going to submit to the city is. They'll submit it up to here. That takes a day or so to process because there is a bit of a manual review on that just to get it in the e-check format to submit up. I'm going to show you what the e-check format looks like today. So you basically come into here, it'll say upload it. So I'm going to put the e-check file into there. And then I'm going to put the architectural drawings into here. So this will now take those drawings, submit for processing. And now what this is doing is it's pulling apart all those drawings and it's running it against a digital version of the code that you're checking against. Now that digital version of the code is specific to each city. So we look at your zoning bylaws and we make a specific template that is that's tailored to your city. So it's the rules and checks that you're looking for with the application that comes in. You've got a lot of control over that. What's important, what's not important, what do you want to get checked, what you don't want to get checked. And the good thing is once you set that up, every submission that comes in goes through that same analysis every time, and it comes out in the same format every time. So what's typical about this is that every piece of property is different, every design is different, and every city is different. So there's a lot of variation. What this does is it starts to standardize this so that everything comes in with the same data, the same analytics, the same things coming through. So this is now processed, it's under final review, and then that'll go to complete. It's coming in already saying there's a high quality submission, and it's got actually everything is passed in this one. I'll show you another one where it doesn't. If I click on this, you'll go into the details of this assessment. So it's going to load that up, it's going to pull out the drawings, and it's going to tell you how many clauses passed, how many failed, and it's going to show you how this all comes together. So you'll see here on the right that it loads up the drawings. So this is where you can interact. And this is coming off the architectural drawings, but it will extract out and pull out each individual drawing and overlay the analysis on it. So what you start to see here on the left is everything that we're checking and a simple tick and cross against it if you pass or fail. So every time you click on one of these, we go into the details of what you're checking in here. So that will switch to the right drawing. And what you'll see here is that you can, if there's multiple drawings, it'll check multiple drawings and it will tell you where those results come from. So what this is looking at is the wall height in here, and it's checking against every elevation and it's picking up the dimensions off the drawings and telling you where it passed or failed. You can now go through these one by one and you can start checking things. So anything that's measurable off the design is something that we can pick up in here. So this one is saying that at least one window has to face the primary street from a habitable room. And the aggregation of those window areas has got to be more than 2 square meters. So we pick that up, we measure it, we show you on the drawings, and we also pull it together in here in the summary. We then move on to things like excavation and fill. In this particular zoning code, you have limitations on how much you can excavate or fill. And this is now picking up the RLs off the survey plan to highlight them on the map, on the drawing, and show you where are you excavating, where are you cutting, and what's your baseline and what's the difference in there to make sure that you've got the right amount there. We can check things like this needs to have a dwelling on it. That's got a dwelling on it. We look at the building height, that all comes through here. We look at the setbacks from the street. You know, all of this information can come through. This starts to look at boundary walls, and there's all different rules around how much you can have on the boundary in this zoning code. And then, you know, what percentage of that boundary can be on that wall. Then you look at things like side setbacks. If there's multiple setbacks in here, it will pick them up and it will tell you what's the worst case. And then again, rear setbacks over here. So there's a whole lot of things that we can detect from here that we can pick up and look at this. So that can also go into the internal layouts of the rooms, pick up how many bedrooms and how many car park spaces are required based on that rate. So I will just go through this process. You can add comments onto this, and then you can get ready to finalize your application and submit. So what happens here is that it generates a PDF report so that you've got access to that. But then you come over to here, and this is where we've created the first full integration into Posse, which is amazing. So all of this information, this data in here, you can submit it in and create an application into Posse. And what it will do is it will submit that in, and then it will create an application. And what you'll see here is that if you go over to here, you know, it will say like success once it's done, and then you'll be able to view that application, and it will launch up Posse, and you'll have that application pre-filled. So when you're ready to apply, you can bring this through to Posse and you can have it pre-filled, and the data comes across as well as the drawings and the uploaded files as well. So this becomes super powerful that it knows what you want to do. So here's a permit application for a new residential building. We're in Metropolis City. That's the pretend city that we've got here. You click next, and then it starts to fill out these details. And depending on what you're submitting, we can fill out as much of this as possible. And the whole idea of this is that you're reducing the amount of rework going through this process. So we know what address you're on. That comes through here, confirm. And then you can basically add in the additional information that you want, you know, so all of this comes into here. You can put your name and details in here. And then once you get over to the drawings, we actually start to bring that through as well. So we're in a laneway house. You can see the lot area comes in, the footprint comes in. These are the notes the applicant had. You can add in, you know, an occupancy type into here. So this might be like an R2. And we put the square footage in there. And then basically we continue on and we get to the drawings. So in here, it says that you require the architectural drawings, but you also require the pre-check, this e-check report. So that you've got that as a city, you get that official report. And what you'll see is that they appear here already. So they're already part of it. So you can come into here and you can say, this is my e-check report. And there's two reports. There's a summary and a full report. And then you've got your architectural plans. So you've now got that part of your application and you can continue through. So again, you know, working through this process, we're trying to streamline it going through. And just so that you know, like how it looks differently, if I switch over and show you, you know, this is in City of Vancouver. So they've got this up and running. What you'll see here is that, again, they're checking different things in here. You'll start to see certain things come in here, but again, it will come in the same format every time. So every submission that comes in gets these checks. If you need to do detailed checks on like GFA, where certain things are included, certain things are excluded, we can table them out into tables like this. This is where we work on the format with you to make sure that we're getting exactly how you want it to work. This is an example where it fails. It doesn't meet the requirement there. This is checking site coverage, location of the laneway house. All of this stuff gets checked in here, and it happens in the same way. And then this is also looking at the city of Burlington, you know, different type of building. This is a series of townhouses. What you'll see is it's all in the same format every time, just different checks that are coming in here. So you're starting to get that consistency that every application coming in is assessed in the same way. And the staff start to get used to seeing all this analytics come in with the application. But also the applicants are starting to realize, okay, before I submit, I'm getting all these checks and I don't want to submit these with red. You know, it's psychological that you want to make sure that you get it as good as possible before you submit, so that you've got the best chance of going through. So I might pause it there, and then there's probably a lot to take in, but it probably gives you a really good example of just the flow, the images, like how it all looks, and how it comes together. But yeah, I'll pass it back over to you, Sam.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for showing all that. I know you're busy, and taking the time out of your day to show that to us today is really, really cool. And I'm sure a lot of people really appreciate the chance to see that. Certainly a lot of our clients will be very interested in looking into this and how it can actually make real world impacts. I'm going to share my screen here really quick, just to highlight a couple of other elements of really what's going on here and a little bit of context. So right now, I've just looking at our staff portal in POSSE PLS. So if you're familiar with our POSSE PLS system, you'll have seen this before. But really, what I want to kind of show two different permit applications. So one is just an ADU. This is that same kind of laneway house, and I've specifically called it a non-e-check one just to make it kind of abundantly clear for everyone. That this is kind of an example of one that doesn't have e-check with it, and here's like what it's all going to entail. So like you can see it just through the history of all the processes on this job. It had to go back to the applicant 4 different times, including one here at the very beginning, just from that initial completeness check. The plans checker looked and it just didn't have all of the documents that it needed, or it didn't have documents in the format that they needed to be in. And it got through that after the applicant kind of sent it back. And then we got into our first review stage, which was really that kind of zoning and development approval side of things. It got sent back again for additional changes. And then it kind of continued on into review cycle 2 and the actual building review before it was finally accepted. So that's a lot of time spent by staff, a lot of time spent by land developers, going back and forth just on communicating, hey, here's all the problems. And I think it just kind of illustrates a lot of what I'm sure many of you are familiar with that process, often requiring numerous back and forths that dramatically increase these timeframes, and then you have unhappy constituents because build times take too long, and you have unhappy staff because they're spending way too long trying to catch up on these backlogs of permit plans. So then if I just jump forward here really quick, I've also got one then that is very similar to what Dr. Curry just showed, and that's a laneway house with Archistar enabled. And we'll notice a couple differences here. So first of all, you'll just see the history of this application is a lot shorter. It got through that completeness check on the first try. That it didn't get sent back to the applicant the same way because we got a really high quality submission right off the bat. And then I actually, and this is a little bit harder to show compared to the last one, but we actually have less reviews overall. And that's because I've set this up to not even require some of those initial like zoning reviews, because we're already going through that process in the pre-check. So if the completeness check says, hey, your application documents, you've already got the file, and we'll show it here from the staff side that Dr. Curry was highlighting, that gets uploaded. So those official e-check reports are right here. We got a summary and the full submission report. So the plans checker can immediately go look at one of these files and confirm that, hey, we already checked the zoning, we already checked some of these layers about the actual land against GIS. We're sure that this is actually going to work. And they can actually see that entire assessment, everything that was green, everything that was red, and have and quickly be able to determine that, hey, we don't even need those initial reviews. So we actually jumped directly into cycle 2 here within these reviews because we didn't even need some of those initial checks because those were already done. So I think that's a little bit of like an example of a high watermark for what we're looking for here in actually accelerating these timeframes in a real way, is really getting so much of that done early on that the staff, when they do finally get their hands on it, they're doing the actually important stuff, the actual building changes, the actual electrical review, the actual engineering, those things that you really want to be focusing on that are crucial, not just all the menial things that need to get out of the way before we get to that point. I'll highlight as well, just starting here from the permit application, to show a little bit more of that integration. So the way we have this configured in POSSE PLS today is when you come in from our customer portal, as in this example, a land developer or a contractor who's going to be helping create, in this case, a laneway house, which is kind of that accessory dwelling unit you may have heard it called, an additional housing building on the same property. We've set up a laneway house permit that instead of clicking through directly to the POSSE application, what it's actually going to do is this one set up to redirect us to Archistar. And so when we click on that, it's going to pull up that map, and I'm going to drop out of full screen really quick here. And this is exactly what Dr. Guru was just showing. We get to our map, we can go look up our parcel or our address that we are interested in. It's going to immediately highlight and zoom in on it. Give it a moment there. Yep. And we start actually doing that research process and that application process. And I think what's also cool about this as well is if I go back to showing some of my other e-check reports here, you'll see I have several of these, and I have the same plans each time, so all of them pass, but I could do this as many times as I need to as a developer to iterate as I get feedback from the system. So if this first one came back and everything was wrong about it, then I don't need to go ahead and submit that. That's not going to go through. So instead, I can kind of iterate and work through the system to get these submissions to a high quality and make those changes without even the jurisdiction needing to be in the loop yet. And once I'm ready to finally submit, then I can go and, like Dr. Curry just showed, take that application forward, move to that submission process, and send this thing directly forward into POSSE and initialize that application. So it allows for that kind of the iterative loop that right now currently includes the jurisdiction to review, send it back, review, send it back, and moves a lot of that out to just something that the builder can do on their own until they're ready to get that submitted. All right,
Sam, there's a couple of questions as well, if you wanted to.
Yeah, so I think we got plenty of time for questions. I think it's 1:40. So yeah, we got plenty of time here to address some of those things that have come in. So I've got Josh Collier on the call as well. Do you want to hop off and just kind of read us? I know you've been monitoring the chat. What are some of the questions that have come in that we could potentially address for people?
Yeah, well, I think the first one I wanted to answer was from Mark Evans. If we're to use Archistar, would we be able to drive users to use this as mandatory or just an option that they can use? And I know, Sam, from the integration that you've been working on with the team from Archistar, we can make it mandatory for specific permit types, right? So if you're in POSSE PLS on the customer portal, clicking the apply for permit button can, instead of launching the application in POSSE PLS, it can actually kick the user over to Archistar where they do the e-check, however many times they need to do it, like you've shown, and then Ben, when they're done, right?
Yeah.
There's that apply for permit process.
Yeah, it's more of a like the technical. It can be forced, it can be mandatory, it can be optional. It's more of a business rule, like what you want to do. But we're finding like the best use case is to make it mandatory, and it's kind of like there's a carrot to it. It's like, hey, you should do this, because this is gonna. If you get it right and you improve the quality of a submission, you're going to get a faster application. And this is getting it in the right format with the right data for us to process it better. So it is about messaging. But it can be done either way, but it's the best use case is if you're going to get people to actually check it before they get in, because you will get better results.
Makes sense. Ben, I'm wondering if I can put you on the spot with this question. Jeff asks, if a municipality is set up with a digitized bylaw and then adopts a new bylaw, how long would it take to update the system to be ready for the new bylaws, and who's able to do those updates?
Yeah, so at the moment, Archistar manages the digitization of the codes. Just because it's a process, we're streamlining that process, and we believe over time we can make that available for municipalities to manage the digitization process. But at the moment, we do that for you just to make it easier. The thing about updating the bylaws is that there's normally a notice period. It's not something that just happens overnight. So we're collaborating with you all along. You're keeping us in the loop. You're telling us, hey, there's going to be an update. We know when you're planning to notify. So we kind of work all that out together and make sure that we time it so that when that's released, we're in line with it. And as I was saying before, like to set up an initial zoning bylaw, it's in the order of like 3 to 6 months max, and that's for the full bylaw. So changing a couple of clauses, it's relatively quick to do.
Right on. An applicant can still submit a failed check, I assume, so they can obtain a refusal. Yep.
Yeah, so like it encourages you to submit a higher quality one and rectify, but obviously, some people will want to, get some variances, so they can submit it. We'll ask them to put commentary and feedback to say why they want to not conform to that rule.
Right on. Joan asks, is the submission format limited to PDF and manual submissions, or are there other formats and methods accepted as well?
Yeah, so the good news is that it can work off CAD files. So if you're an architect that's working in CAD, which most are, you can just add the extra metadata onto your design, and then you can run it through that process and get that like you're getting real-time feedback as you're designing. And I think that's the ultimate goal, that the architects are doing it. But what we realize is that this takes time for people to learn and for people to work. So we accept the PDF because then you can actually apply it on any submission coming in, you know? So we got both, best of both worlds.
All right, and this one's coming. Is there data on how much review time is being saved using eCheck? And that's probably going to be a variable answer depending on the type of plans and the type of permits, but.
Yeah, true. And it's interesting, like we're still very early stages with it. The city of Vancouver is actually the first to go to production with it worldwide. We just recently signed up the city of Boston. They've just announced they're going to production. And there's a whole bunch more that have gone through the pilot stage, loving the results, and are going to production. What we're already seeing in the city of Vancouver is that there are repeat clients. There are architects that have submitted multiple projects. They've been out of beta in production for about maybe 3 to 6 months now. And there are applicants that have submitted 4 different projects using this. And we've seen the first one go through with no issues, no request for information. It just got submitted full ticks and it went through and got permitted. So this is very early stages and we're already seeing that behavior. It's very promising. And I think if you look at it and you saw the example up on the screen, how many times you go back to the client, if you took out 1 of them, 2 of them, if you imagine you had none, like it was a complete submission that went through, you can calculate the time saving on that. And we're starting to see evidence that that's a real possibility, that you could get applicants that are completely compliant.
Wow. No, that's pretty amazing. Jason asks, how much volume is typically needed to train the tool and have your clients move to the stage where they're not checking the plans following the eCheck? So skipping manual review completely and auto issuing a permit.
The volume's not a crazy amount, surprisingly. So we typically train on about 20 submissions for a particular building type. So if you did laneway houses or houses, but then once we get that up and running, then we go through some internal testing with your team. So you might want to run it 3 months to 6 months internally. So the team's really comfortable with it. They're seeing applications go through. So to train it, we only really need 20 submissions, but your team might want to work with it a bit more behind the scenes before they push it out to public. It's interesting. I didn't think that it would happen so quickly, but some of the cities we're talking to, they're feeling that confident with the tool that like every city's got their checklist of what they check. And what we're hearing is that they're going to modify those checklists to say what's being checked on each check. Don't go and recheck that. Like it's checked. Like we're comfortable with what that check is. So you can choose what you want to take off that. There might be some really simple ones that you're like, no brainer. Like we don't need to check that anymore. There might be some that you say, we still want to check that one, just to double check it. And that's all good as well.
Okay. One more question just came in. Does data submitted by developers remain on the Archistar servers? If yes, what security measures are in place?
Yes, so it does remain on Archistar servers, but we have gone through every security questionnaire with all these big cities that you can think of, and we've done that across Canada, the US, Australia. So all of the data is hosted if you're in Canada on Canadian servers, in US servers, and we will go through all your security requirements, and we pass, you know, some of the bigger cities, so you can be sure that we've got all of our tech up to scratch.
Right on.
Looks like we're out of time, and we're gonna get
Yeah.
kicked out here. So I do appreciate everyone for coming on, especially Dr. Khoury. Have a good day.